What's up, marketing maniacs, and welcome back to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand, your ultimate BFF in the wide world of digital marketing. Join me, your host, Nicholas Kuhne, spilling the beans on the juiciest trends and hottest tips to up your marketing game.
Well, howdy everybody. We've got a treat for you today. We've got Scott Ritzheimer, as you'd say, or Ritzheimer, or Ritzheimer, however we want to pronounce that. And I was just having a joke earlier because he's got a name, well, Scottish name, Scott Ritzheimer, and I'm Nicholas Kuhne, which is, or Nicholas Johann Wilhelm von Kuhne. Yeah, anyway, so it's very, very German, but we don't sound very German, I guess. So after that long intro, so Scott is an entrepreneur who's been through the ringer and come out the other side with some quite life-changing or game-changing insights. He's been in the trenches of launching and scaling businesses, and let's just say it hasn't always been smooth sailing. He's had his fair share of surprises and has learned the hard way that the rules of success aren't set in stone. So Scott has dealt with over 20,000 startups, entrepreneurs, managers, etc., and built a roadmap for an entrepreneurial journey, a blueprint called the Founder's Evolution. So we're going to talk a little bit about that with Scott. So first of all, Scott, welcome aboard.
Nicholas, thanks for having me here. I laugh when you say my name because I actually had a guy on my show, remarkable guy, but born, raised in Germany, moved here to the US later in his life. And we were talking about his name, and he said, your name is actually not Ritzheimer, right? And I was like, wait, what? He's like, Ritzheimer. I was like, that's too much phlegm for me, my friend. Like, I'm going to roll with Ritzheimer. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. I love talking about entrepreneurism. I love entrepreneurs. And so getting an opportunity to talk through some of you're right. There aren't rules that govern success, but what I have found is that there are patterns to predict success. It's two very different environments, and excited to be able to share some of that here today.
So let's talk about that. In your work, you've helped thousands and thousands of founders and entrepreneurs, and I looked at the last number, around 20,000. I was trying to go through, okay, if I divide 20,000 by that's quite a lot of entrepreneurs, and obviously there must be, as you said, a pattern of success that you can find when dealing with that volume of data. And obviously it's a lot of data. But let's start with the basics of a founder. It's somebody who founds a business. And if we can have a look at maybe what are some of the common misconceptions of people who are founding businesses?
Yeah. I mean, where do we start? So here's the journey actually begins before you become a founder, before you step in. And one of the most common misperceptions actually has to do with the name of the first stage in the journey, as I've mapped it out. And that is the dissatisfied employee, right? So when you look now, not necessarily an employee, but there's this dissatisfaction that is just a necessary ingredient for anyone who's going to go out and start their own business, for any entrepreneur. And sometimes it's forced on them. They lose a job. They're just trying to figure out what to do. Sometimes they're stuck with a manager that they just can't stand. Sometimes there's just this burning desire in them that they can't resist anymore. But there's this dissatisfaction.
But sometimes it's all of the above.
Yes. And many times it's all of the above. And often it's there. And it's why so many of these stories is because we need the discomfort of that to thrust us forward, right? We actually need the discomfort of that to propel us into and through the next stages. Here's the myth, though. Just because you're a dissatisfied employee does not mean you've begun your entrepreneurial journey, right? Just because you're frustrated at work doesn't mean you should go start a new business. In fact, I've helped a lot of folks start businesses. And one of the things I'll get asked is who should start a business? Or someone will come and say, hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. And as much as I love entrepreneurs and as dear to my heart as founders are, I will tell folks 100% of the time, if there's anything else you can do, go do it. Right? Because there are much easier ways of making money, achieving work-life balance. You're doing a lot of these things that folks who start their own business try to accomplish. There are easy ways of accomplishing most of those. And what happens is when we do that, when we really go the discipline of, hey, can I do anything else, right? What happens is those that are left they're almost left with no other choice, even if it's just for conviction. I'm not saying these are down and outs of society, although there are some who become the beacons of our society to come. But there's just this thing inside a founder that even when things are good, they there's more, right? Even when things are okay. So the litmus test for me, if you're a dissatisfied employee, if you're frustrated, in any environment, you're thinking about starting a business, the first question is, can you do anything else? The second question is, how long can you wait before you start it? Because the longer you wait, the clearer you'll become on whether or not you should actually start the business. For example, if you're frustrated, you got a bad manager, go find another job, right? Like go find another boss. And if it gets better, then great, you figured it out. That's a lot easier than going and starting a business and it not working. And so take some time. The other part of it, and this is even for those who have the conviction to say, hey, I know this is where it's going. I know it's what I'm going to be. Once we feel that angst and that like, hey, I've got to move, I've got to start my own business, we just jump, right? We don't look at all. And some folks find their feet, good for them. But what happens is one of the reasons why so many new businesses fail are for the first reason we talked about, they shouldn't have started a business in the first place. But the second one, the main reason why folks who should start their own business fails because they jump too soon. They leap in, and I'm not talking about market timing or anything like that. What I'm talking about is, have they taken the time to really understand what they're about to do? For example, someone might be a great baker, but that doesn't mean you're going to build a great bakery, right? Someone might be an excellent salesperson, but that doesn't mean you can build a business selling whatever it is you've been selling. There's a whole lot more that goes into it. And so no matter how skilled you are, no matter how long you've been doing whatever it is you've been doing, there are a lot of lessons to learn before your business becomes successful. And the more of those you can learn before you start, the more of those you can learn on someone else's dime before you're struggling to make payroll every week, right? Before you're struggling to make your own payroll every week, the more of those things that we can iron out and transform our how not to's, I'm not going to do it that way, to our how to's. This is my strategy and I've proven it's going to work. The more of those you can do before you make the leap and go full time, the better. So one of the biggest misconceptions is no, not everyone should start a business. And two, just because you should start a business doesn't mean you should jump right in and do it now.
You made quite a few valuable points there. In the one about not everyone is an entrepreneur, I think I read a statistic somewhere where it said that employees make 25% more over the lifetime of their work than most entrepreneurs. And that's a fact that I think people need to understand. So exactly, it has to be based on passion. It has to be based on, it's not just the money. So if you go into being an entrepreneur to make bank, that you probably better off staying and being an employee for 20 years and cashing in your pension after a while. So that, and I think that's, not everyone wants to hear that not everyone is going to be an entrepreneur, but it's a valuable step. And I think that you do that in the beginning shows that you're not a charlatan, because most people are just going to try and take people's cash. Yes, everyone's going to be an entrepreneur. Do it. Pay me some cash and I'll show you how to do it. So I really love that process. And what you've spoken about, I've gone through in my own entrepreneurial journey as well. Awful boss, thought I can do it better, and got to that stage where I'd been in great jobs and that, but I just thought, this is not me. This is not what I want to do. So we've gotten past the stage of you've filtered out those guys or those folks who are not meant to be entrepreneurs. They maybe have got a bee in their bonnet, and they try it and they fail. Let's ignore those folks, because there's a lot of those. Let's go into, you've got a bee in your bonnet. You've got a good idea. You have got a bit of not a lot of cash behind it, but you've got a little bit of, you maybe got your first little client that you've got working on the side. What is the next step? How do you make sure that you do not stumble in that early stage? What are the keys to success?
Yeah. So that stage, and what I've done in this idea, the leadership, the founder's evolution, the leadership journey that founders face is, it's really, really hard to recognize how much this game changes as you progress. So contrast it just quickly with the leadership journey we just talked about here. For folks who are employees, part of why it's so easy, it's so much easier to create the kind of success, monetary, and even freedom at this stage in the game, is that each one of these milestones that you have to accomplish, moving from an individual contributor to a manager, moving from a manager to a leader, moving from a leader to an executive, they in the employee's journey, they come with a new title more often than not, right? It comes with a new position. Hopefully, it comes with a new pay raise. But there's something outside of us to validate why it's so hard to succeed in the next role, right? Just because you're a great individual contributor doesn't mean you're going to be a great manager. Just because you're a great manager doesn't mean you're going to be able to lead through others, et cetera, et cetera. And so those transitions are hard enough to make. There are entire podcasts, there's entire industries built on helping individual contributors become managers. That's a hard transition to make. But the employee has the advantage over the founder in that the employee knows that shift has taken place, right? There's a title to validate. Well, for founders, there's no indication that the game has changed. When do you move from being an individual contributor to being a manager, right? When do you get the new title of line manager? For founders, from day one, actually, it's usually day minus something. They go out and they get their first business card. And what's it say on the title? Founder and CEO. The reality of it is your work won't even remotely resemble that of a CEO until stage 5. Now, you can call yourself that. I have no problem with that. I'm founder and CEO, and I'm in stage 2. So I don't care what you put on your title. You just have to recognize you're not actually a CEO, right? I have a consulting company. I am the lead consultant. I am, the chief fixer, because I'm a solo operation. And so what we have to do in this first stage, and I'm coming to the point, as we're progressing through this, the very first thing we have to do is recognize what stage we're in and what's appropriate for that stage. So at our point in the process, your question is in stage 2. And to illustrate each of these stages, I've kind of got this parallel in the book of kind of positions in a sports hierarchy, just so we can have something to look at, something to see. Stage 2 is not about being the best leader in the world. It's actually not even about being the best strategist or entrepreneur or all these lofty things we say. Stage 2 is all about being a star player. It's about knowing what you have to do and doing it exceptionally well and doing it again and again. And where a lot of folks who really do have what it takes to become entrepreneurs, where they struggle in this is they're great at starting things, right? They're great at starting that new, marketing campaign. They're great at starting that new service, but they're not great at finishing it, right? And so what we've got to do, we actually have to turn off a lot of the noise on all the things that we should be doing or all the things we should be improving or all of the fancy strategies. We need to put blinders on and focus on finishing things. Right? It is not about, I get folks all the time, I've started 17 businesses. Well, how many of them did you actually finish? Right?
Well, my ears are burning here because what you're talking about there, I think, is what shutters most businesses, is that ability to finish and be single track. Because I think typically entrepreneurs are those folks with ideas. And the next shiny thing, if this is not working exactly as I want it to work, the next shiny thing is going to take my attention. And, my business is in South Africa and I've just launched in Norway as well. And I've got a new team, a new CEO here. And we're going through the similar, it's a new country, completely different offerings and that, and they're going through the exact same things. It's that focus that's extremely important. Now, I want to go back just quickly and talk about the Founder's Evolution book, because obviously that's why we're chatting. So before we go into more amazing, because honestly, I think if people listen to this podcast, they might not need to read your book. You're giving away so many juicy ideas here, but let's talk about the Founder's Evolution and what made you write this book, and what are the main details in this book that folks can expect?
Yeah. We've already alluded to some of it, so we'll just kind of build on it. There's actually, I'm going to tell a story that opened up the book on, and And what it does is it illustrates why this matters so much, right? Because who cares? Founders evolution stages, I don't have time for that, right? If you're thinking that, I thought that too. It took me a long time to even buy into this idea. I'll tell you why I did eventually, but um, why does it matter? So let's imagine, again, I use a sports analogy through it. I'm actually not that crazy about sports. It's just a helpful set of metaphors. So you don't have to be a massive sports enthusiast to roll with me here. But I'm from America. We like American football. And so let's imagine it's the big game. It's a championship game. And in American football, you got to get the ball into the end zone. That's how you score points. And if you do, you get 6 points, which is a really weird number, but it's just how it works. So let's imagine we're just in front of the end zone. We're not in yet. We've got to get at least 4 points, which means we got to get in and get our 6-point touchdown. And it's the very last seconds of the game. We only have a few seconds left. If we get in, we win. If we don't get in, we lose. It's that simple, right? And so you've got the perfect play. You know what to call. You've run it 1,000 times. You call the play. And the one thing, though, that's different this time is you're not going to touch the ball. From now until the play is over, all you can do is stand and watch because you're a coach and you have to watch what happens from the sideline. And so everyone's lined up with bated breath. You're waiting. The play starts and everything starts working perfectly. Everyone's executing exactly to point. It tricks the defense. And you just think it's nanoseconds have passed, right? But you realize that we've got this. It's going to work. And you look to the side and the guy who's supposed to run and catch the ball actually got the wrong play. He's blocking instead of running. And without a moment's hesitation, you just take off, right? Running faster than you've ever run in your life down the sideline. Remember, coach, right? Headsets flying off, clipboard hits one of your assistant coaches in the head, and you're going. They're going to study the physics on this for years because no one can figure out how you ran that far, that fast. And what do? You get there just in time to make the diving catch in the end zone like you did over your whole career. And every time you've done that in the past, everyone stands up and cheers. But this time, crowd of 80,000 people, and you could hear a pin drop. Not a single sound. Nobody can figure out what just happened. The coach just ran on the sideline and caught the ball. Can you do that? And you can't. It's a penalty. Not only did you violate the rules of the game, not only did your catch not count, it actually guaranteed that you would lose. What would have been something that your team would celebrate for years, decades, would have earned you a spot in the Hall of Fame is now the laughing stock and the embarrassment of your team and yourself. And so in the history of American football, at least professional, that's never happened, right? Like that would never, it's absolutely ludicrous. But I work with founders and CEOs and they do it every single day because there's no visible boundary lines for founders. Who in your organization is going to tell you, no, you can't do that, right? It's this invisible process. And so what happens is, founder is there laying on the ground, sore from running and diving, right? Wondering why everyone's booing them. They're frustrated. They're exhausted. They're in pain. Their team members are frustrated. They're exhausted. And they're like, it's not working for anybody. And we're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to succeed. Where did it all go wrong? And so when this happens for founders, it leaves them asking this question, like, is this it? Like, is this really why I started that business all these years ago? Is this really why I sacrificed again and again and again to have this, to be frustrated, to be exhausted? Sure, you might have a multi-million-dollar business, but are you enjoying it? And so many times we get stuck in this process. And I know what happened to me. And again, I've seen this happen so many times to so many folks is when we get into that space and we realize we can't muscle our organization through to success anymore. We can't just pick it up by its bootstraps and make it happen. We're dependent on all these other people, which means we're not in control like we thought we were. And it leads to this feeling of isolation. It leads to many times this feeling of failure or to feeling like an imposter or to feeling like, hey, I've just hit my limit. I can't go any further. And we feel like we're capped out and we're ready to tap out. And the reality of it is if you're at that stage, you are only one step away from the single biggest transformation that you can achieve. But you have to understand where the boundaries are. You have to understand what the strategies are for that stage to be able to make the change. And so without a map to show us the way, we just kind of bumble and bounce through these, you'll figure it out, right? An entrepreneur, they tend to be bullheaded enough and creative enough to eventually figure it out, right? It's not necessarily that it's rocket science and you can never get it, but how much pain will you have to undergo to do it? I was just on a podcast and another guy was saying the feeling of entrepreneurs is like you're playing a game of snakes and ladders, right? Or chutes and ladders. And it's like you're climbing, and then all of a sudden, boom, blind spot. You're all the way back down at the beginning again. What just happened? What happened was you didn't understand the rules of the game. You didn't follow the right steps and the right patterns. And because of that, it's undermining your success and your ability to scale.
So are you saying that there's a pattern to entrepreneurship? I know there are business schools and there are programs to learn entrepreneurship, which I think it's good, but you've actually got to, I think it's more a vocational thing. You have to do entrepreneurship, but it's good having some guide rails. And why I say this is, and if I look at people that I've worked with, every single business that I've worked with is completely different. So, and I think lots of founders will say, well, they won't understand me or those rules don't apply to me because my business is completely different. Are there some fundamentals? Are there the 10 commandments of entrepreneurship that one can follow for success?
Yeah. So here's a couple of ways of looking at that. There is nothing that is going to 100% guarantee anything. I am not selling certainty, right? That anyone who sells you certainty, you talked about this earlier, is to some extent a liar, right? Or they may not realize it yet. They may not be mean-spirited about it, but there's no such thing as certainty in this. What we can do is increase predictability. There are no guaranteed, like you have to do this step 1, step 2, step 3, but there are patterns that when you look over a large group of people like I did, there are patterns that folks follow. Now, this pattern that I've laid out in the model and where I finally realized, you're right. Like there are nuances to every business. There are nuances to every founder. But when I finally was able to get the confidence and recognize, oh, there's actually one pattern for everybody. There's really actually just one story going on. It wasn't until I started to learn about how actual storytelling works and is structured. And it's actually the exact same story of Jason Bourne in the Bourne Ultimatum, or Jesus in the Bible, or the Gandhi and his experiences. When you look at all these amazing stories, Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, they all follow a same pattern. Now, those are all very different stories. Those are all very different people. They had very different goals and desires, but they all followed the same pattern. And that's what I've found here. That's what I've been able to see in all of these different environments and live myself and help other people navigate now. So the way I like to liken it is, it's kind of like if you're in the US and you're trying to get from, let's call it LA in the Southwest to Chicago in the middle. There are lots of ways to get there, but there's a whole lot more ways of not getting there, right? And so I'm not saying there's only one way, but when you look at it and you watch this happen as many times as I have, you see as many people fail as I have, you see as many people succeed as I have. And you start to see those who fail do so largely in part because they denied the pattern. And those who succeed largely do so not because they necessarily even consciously knew the pattern existed, but they found it and they lived by it.
So you've given some cool examples there. I suppose one that I use, if I look at your process, is Homer's the Iliad with Odysseus. And I mean, I worked at a company where they had been very successful and they had gotten to sort of a ceiling, and it was deciding, okay, now, not Homer, Odysseus has now saved the ladies, beaten the Cyclops, gone through all his trials. Is he going to sit at home and get fat now? You never hear anything else about Odysseus after the Odyssey. So I suppose that would be another one of the stages in the book. And it's something I wanted to touch on with you, is that how do you get over that struggle with scaling your business? So a lot of founders will get to a point where they know they can do better, but they're just struggling. They just can't get there's either a mental block, a cash block, some kind of block in their business that is stopping them from going forward. Do you have something in your processes that talks to that?
Yeah, I do. And it's really, especially at that stage, oftentimes this happens at stage 4. I call it the disillusioned leader. It's not a pleasant moment more often than not. That feeling of hitting a lid and just hitting it and hitting it, it's not because they haven't tried to fix it, right? We're not talking about folks who are just sitting around on their thumbs waiting for success to happen. If you've been able to create enough success to get to this point in the first place, you're pretty awesome. Well, let's just be like, do you have it all figured out? No, this is proof that you don't have it all figured out. But this is happening to competent, capable people. And so what has to happen, the very first thing that has to happen is you've got to make sure that your vision actually demands you to go to the next level, right? Many times when I start working with somebody, and it's close to 50% of the time, what they think of as the next level that they're beating themselves up over after not getting it is actually not what they want. They just want a better version of their current level. Many times folks don't need to go up and to the right. They need to learn to enjoy today more. So the very first thing that I'll do with a client is sit down and say, hey, where's this going, right? What's your vision for the company? What are you really what do you really need to drive to? It's similar to what we talked about all the way at the beginning of the process, and it shows up again here. The difference is before we started the business, we really didn't have much to lose. Like there was nothing there. Now that we're in it, there's this justified fear that if we do that, we make these changes that feel murky and mysterious. They're not, but they feel murky and mysterious. Will that just sink the whole thing? And so the very first thing is you have to be clear on your vision. And much like when you're seated on an airplane, sometimes the closest exit is actually behind you. And for many people out there that are experiencing the pain that we're talking about here, sometimes all you have to do is just go back a couple days, right? Just go back a couple deals, go back a couple of hires. So many times the frustration you're feeling is because you think it has to go up and to the right because you're borrowing someone else's vision for your company. And if you can just settle with your own vision for the company, you may not need to scale up. Scaling is not for everyone. It's not better to scale than to be great at what you do right now.
Yeah, well, there's such clear points, and I really love that. So when it comes to your book, who should be reading this? Is this people who are going to start out being entrepreneurs, or does this suit people who are in between stages, or stage 1, stage 3, stage 4? I mean, what kind of level are we talking at here? Who should read your book?
Yeah.
It is get most value from your book.
This sounds a little cliche, but it's true. It goes from pre-launch to post-exit, right? So this we've documented the entire journey. There is something in there for every founder and business owner. What you'll find is that where folks have the most trouble is in stages 3 and 4. Those are the 2 stages that are least like your natural wiring as a founder. Those are the stages where the pressure on you is actually at its peak, and the perceived reward for working through that pressure is at an all-time low. And so folks they've been in business for several years, they've built a successful company, and they're struggling to reach that next level. And they're struggling to know who to go to because they tell their friends and family, they're like, what's wrong with you? You're leading a $5 million company. Why are you complaining? Right? They've listened to their coach from the past, but the advice they're giving just doesn't seem like it's enough to move the needle. Folks that are stuck in what feels like that in-between place. I'm not in startup mode anymore. I've conquered that beast, but I haven't really scaled successfully. Now, I have had some success, but there's something missing. This book's going to unlock that for you.
So one big area that I think sinks a lot of businesses is where founders reach a technical or a limit of their abilities to take the business forward. And how often have you seen in businesses that you've dealt with that folks don't recognize that they're no longer the right people to lead this business. It's time to get in managers. It's time to move into a different role. How challenging is that for founders, do you think?
Yeah, I actually want to challenge the presumption that's built into that a little bit. I think this is really important. I don't think there is a fatalistic kind of arbitrary limit on what most founders can achieve. Um, eh, when you boil it down to the exact situation that they're in, is everyone going to become Elon Musk? No, that's not what I'm talking about here. But most of the time, when folks are asking the type of question that you ask, they're asking the wrong question. So instead of saying, do I have what it takes to take my company to the next level? The better question to ask is, how do I need to adapt? How would I need to change to take my company to the next level? I have seen folks that nobody would peg as someone who could lead a $100 million organization do it with ease. I have seen folks that people would think would be fantastic at leading a $100 million organization struggle at 1 million, right? It's what's very different about the founder's journey than almost every other journey is how dynamic it is. For the founder, the idea that there's a technical limit is typically not the case. Usually what it is, what's got them stuck is that they either don't recognize what's necessary for the next level, right? They're still clinging on to what worked from the past and they don't recognize that the stage has changed. Or they know that the stage has changed and they know that what got you here won't get you there, but they have no idea what will get you there, right? No one has actually taught them what new skill set they need. Nobody is born a $100 billion CEO, right? Everyone who's ever done that has learned it. And at some stage in the process, they thought they didn't have what it takes. So what's more important than the question of could I ever be a $100 million CEO, or fill in whatever number you want to use? The better question to ask is, how do I need to change to do that? Because what you'll find is most of the time when folks are feeling the limitation that you're talking about, they're trying to carry the whole organization on their shoulders. They're that coach on the sideline trying to run up and down as fast as they can and muscle it all through. And they're jumping into the plays and they're interrupting things and they're torching their own success, right? It's not that it's really all that much harder to move to the next stage. It just requires a different skill set. And so what I've found is, first, if you have the vision to say, hey, this is where the organization is going and I'm going to lead it there, but I need to recognize what that new skill set is. I've found that the vast majority of the people who get those three things right, there's a new one, I want to lead it there, and I know I have to change to do it. Those are the folks who can win. So it's not that you're limited and you can't move it forward. What happens at that stage is you realize, do I want to move it forward? All right. Do I want to be that guy? And again, that's usually happening in that stage 4.
So it goes to know thyself, basically, or to thine own self be true. And I think a lot of people don't take the time to understand themselves very well. It's too much worrying about payroll, as you said. It's about those orders aren't in. Since you're the one that's leading the business, there's got to actually be effort and time put into your development as well. And I guess you touch on that in the book. Now, when I saw that you'd worked on 20,000 businesses, I thought I've got to ask, okay, how do you keep yourself motivated? Because surely after 20,000 businesses, you've seen it all. What does the next couple of years look like for you and your business?
Yeah. Yes, I did get tired. So the vast majority of that time was spent in startup mode. And that's a rough place to be for anyone for any extended period of time, right? So if you're in startup mode or you're helping people in startup mode, it takes a special kind of person to stay there for a really long time. And 15 years was about as much as I could take. So I don't do a whole lot of work in startups anymore. Most of my work now is in scale ups. And so that's a new challenge for me. It's a new space for me. We're 6-7 years into this now, but that's what it keeps it exciting. I love the variety, right? You talked about, does this work for my industry or business? I work in all kinds of industries, from tree farms to medical institutions to nonprofits, like all over the map. And so that's really interesting. I love getting to learn about the different businesses. And This goes to your point when you talked about Odysseus, and one of the most poignant spots where his decision, am I going to go home and get fat and lazy, or am I going to move to the next thing, happens when folks are in stage 6, like I was relatively early in my career, what I call the true owner, and saying, hey, is this story all about me? Right? Because that's if Odysseus's story is all about him, then he went home satisfied. But if Odysseus realized, all these things that I've been through, all the challenges that I've faced are actually not about me. They're lessons that I needed to learn so I can help others who are coming up behind me to not have to experience those things. When we recognize that this whole story was never about us in the first place, it was actually about what we can create in our wake to make it easier for the folks behind us, we step into stage 7, which is I call the visionary founder, where you get back into the game purely for the love of the game. And what's so beautiful about that stage is that the wins aren't yours anymore. They're someone else's. I got an email from one of my clients today, and he said, every month since we worked with you, we have grown by double digits per month. And it's like that little sentence for me, right? I won't reap anything of that. It's not like I have an equity deal with them, right? It's got me so jazzed. Like I am over the moon for them. And they're off to the races. I mean, it's so exciting for them. We added $1 million to one of my clients' bottom lines this year, and another one. And like their wins become so special. And that's what keeps me fired up right now.
Well, you should go into, I suppose it is teaching. I mean, that's what I do here in Norway. So I teach in digital marketing, and it's the same thing. You want to train up. And I said to my class this morning, I want you are a reflection of me. You go out and are successful and kick ass. I'm going to feel amazing because it's a wonderful reflection on me. So part of the teaching is very self-centered. I want to, have mini me's running out there with some of my great ideas. And when they do well, that's cash money to me in my heart, basically. So I totally get that. Scott, we could talk a lot about entrepreneurship, and I think we probably need to delve into specific chapters. But what I'd like to do is a little call to action at the end here. Where can I send folks to get your book, or to actually have the opportunity to talk to you about their startup challenge and actually get moving on the process?
Yeah. So both of those in the same place. If you head on over to scalearchitects.com/founders, there is a free copy of the book waiting for you. There's also an opportunity to book a call with me directly. You're not booking it with anybody else. It's for you and I to share. And while, again, I don't do a ton of work in the startup world, I will have a call with anyone who wants one, right? And if I can, in 20, 30 minutes, if I can save you some of the heartache and headaches that I experienced in my time and get you pointed in the right direction to achieve those kinds of results, right? Double-digit growth, $1 million in profit. It would just be my absolute joy and honor to do it. So head on over to scalearchitects.com/founders. You will get a free copy of the book there, and you'll also have an opportunity to book a call with me.
That's amazing. Well, I encourage all of my listeners and students to go and download that book, number one. And if they're ready for it, to scale their businesses, to get in touch with Scott. Scott, it's been a delight to talk to you, and I can really see your passion come through. And you've got some prophetic words in terms of how to run a business and get over those humps that basically affect everyone on their startup journey. So thank you so much for your time. I totally appreciate it.
Nicholas, thanks. It was a pleasure.
Now, before we wrap up, don't forget to show some love for From Startup to Wunderbrand by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. If you'd like to help us grow, tell your friends, share on social media, and leave us a review. For those of you who want to dive a little bit deeper into the topic, join me on Twitter @Kuhne. Let's connect and chat about all things branding and digital. Until next time,